Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Archana Solanki. Here are the headlines we're tracking this evening. Sensex and Nifty gain 1% for the third straight week. Mid-caps and small-caps underperformed. Reliance Industries rallies 10% to mark the biggest weekly rally in 5 years. Supreme Court rejects JSW Steel's acquisition of Bhushan Steel, citing gross violation and non-compliance of the bankruptcy laws. JSW Steel shares plunge after the top court rules the insolvency proceedings are vitiated and orders liquidation of Bhushan Steel. China says that it's evaluating the possibility of starting trade negotiations with the United States, but reiterates its request that the US remove all unilateral tariffs, adds that failure to do so would indicate an outright lack of sincerity on Washington's part. Apple CEO Tim Cook confirms majority of iPhones sold in the US will now originate from India and Vietnam as it looks to offset the impact of US tariffs on China, warns of a $900 million hit if the current tariffs persist. Apple still manages to report a profit of nearly $25 billion in Q1. Pakistan violates ceasefire again at the LOC for the 8th consecutive day. Indian Army says it responded in a calibrated and proportionate manner. AirIndia says that it could incur an additional loss of $600 million if Pakistan's airspace remains closed for a full year. Requests government for a subsidy model for its international flights. Government clarifies on converting spectrum dues to equity after Bharti Airtel sought similar treatment to Vodafone Idea. Sources say only dues for spectrum acquired before 2021 will be considered for conversion to equity. Cognizant's top brass says 20% of its code is presently written by machines and this could rise to 50%. Expects the focus to shift from services to embedding technology in products. Hamdard informs the Delhi High Court that Yoga Guru Ramdev's videos targeting Ruh Afza have not been pulled down from YouTube and have only been made private. This despite Ramdev offering to remove the communal videos yesterday after the court threatened contempt proceedings against him. Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri sees insatiable appetite for Reels in India on the second day of the World Audio Visual Entertainment Summit. YouTube CEO Neil Mohan says 21,000 crore rupees have been paid to content creators so far and promises to invest 850 crore rupees in India over the next 2 years. And actor Aamir Khan bats for a higher number of theatrical screens in India, underlines that even the biggest hits have a theatrical footfall, accounting for only 2% of the entire population. Also calls the short time window between the theatrical and the OTT release of a film a faulty business model. All right, let's start with the market action. Sensex and Nifty ended flat on Friday to end the truncated week with 1% gains. Mid-caps and small-caps underperformed on Friday and the week. Reliance Industries was the star of the week, gaining 10% in what was the biggest weekly gain in the last 5 years. Prashant Nair is here with a market wrap.
Well, Friday was absolutely flat, but for the week, the market posted gains. And, the Nifty, the 1.3% gains Friday to Friday. Of course, there was a holiday in between. The Nifty Bank about 0.8%, mid-cap index about 0.3%. The small-cap index, though, was down about 0.6% or so. So the run broadly on the way up continues. What really stood out as far as the large-cap stocks are concerned, Reliance. RIL went up 9% this week, and that was the big reason why the market did what it did. Adani Ports with a 6% pop, Maruti 6%, and BPCL was up about 5% this week as well. JSW Steel, of course, the damage, the bulk of it happened on Friday, actually all of it, 5.5% lower. Ultratech 5% and Bajaj Finserv was down about 4% as well. The broader market, lots of action. I'll start with what was up in a big way, at least 10% and more in terms of gains. I could spot 4 names. Sonata Software, 26%. It kind of ran up sharply. It's a company which depends on Microsoft as a key client. The defense companies had a pretty good week. Garden Reach was up 17%, Mazgaon was up 13%, Data Patterns was up about 11% or so. On the downside, Tejas Network, 18% cut this week. SW Solar was down about 17, 5-star 12.5. Praj Industries was down about 11% or so as well. I mean, as we head into the weekend, of course, all eyes on trade headlines, because that, of course, has the ability to move market, although I must say at the margin, it's moving markets lesser so. But we've kind of come up quite sharply. The Nasdaq, for example, is up about 20% from its April lows. Once again, are we going to get into that zone where Trump and his statements on trade, etc., start to matter? I think we'll have to see. We heard from the Chinese Commerce Ministry, and they essentially, in a cryptic way, they said that they're conducting assessment on U.S. trade talks, and they're asking the U.S. to be responsible and kind of sort of, behave themselves. There are elections in Australia and Singapore. And of course, locally here, I think while with a few days, more than a few days having passed, with the market waiting for some sort of a potential escalation between India and Pakistan, I think that risk premium perhaps gets taken down a notch, I think, as we saw on Friday as well. Earnings so far has not been all that great. The earnings overall scorecard and picture, and I think that continues to be a key focus area into the coming week as well. Back to you.
Right. Thank you, Prashant, for that. In the money market, the Indian rupee briefly breached the 84 mark against the US dollar to hit the highest level in 7 months. However, the Indian currency weakened in late trade to end with losses of about 9 paisa. 10-year bond yields remain largely steady. From currencies to commodities, crude oil prices rose as China indicated that it is open to talks with the US. The possibility of USA imposing secondary sanction on buyers of Iranian oil also supported prices. Similarly, prices of gold rose marginally after hitting a 2-week low the previous day. However, prices of the yellow metal remained on track for their worst weekly performance in more than 2 months. All right, the top story this evening. The Supreme Court has scrapped JSW Steel's acquisition of bankrupt Bhushan Power and Steel. The apex court cited gross violation and non-compliance of the bankruptcy laws by JSW Steel and ordered liquidation of Bhushan Steel. Shares of JSW Steel plunged in trade. Ashmit Kumar is here with more on the court's scathing order. Ashmit.
Well, we need a big setback coming in for JSW. The Supreme Court setting the clock back by about 5 to 6 years as far as this entire CIRP insolvency proceedings are concerned for Bhushan Power and Steel. The big takeaway is that the Supreme Court was unhappy on 2 grounds. Number one, the Supreme Court was unhappy with how this entire process has taken much longer than what had been earlier decided. The resolution plan, there's a window for which there needs to be execution. The Supreme Court said it's been over 2 years since the NCLAT granted its approval, but despite that, there's been little or no forward movement. That is something that, in fact, the Supreme Court has taken very strong objection to. The other is how this entire transaction, where JSW is trying to take over Bhushan Power and Steel, went via the twin route of both the equity as well as optionally convertible debentures. And that, again, is something that the Supreme Court said it is not in keeping with the resolution plan. There's only so much leeway that can be granted, and that the Supreme Court, given the fact that there are multiple deviations from the set process as per under the IBC, the Supreme Court says that it has no option but to set aside this entire resolution plan. So bear in mind, it was in 2019 that the NCLT had granted approval, and since then things had begun to move forward. But the Supreme Court's saying that both at the pre-approval and the post-approval stage, there are a number of violations that the Supreme Court can't keep its eyes shut. It will have to take action, setting aside that JSW resolution plan, with that sending the company, Bhushan Power and Steel, into liquidation, and therefore, in a sense, setting the clock back by about 5 years for this entire insolvency process. Back to you.
Right. Thank you, Ashmit, for that. So how will this order impact JSW Steel? Nigel D'Souza is here with more on this. Nigel, can JSW Steel ask the apex court to review its ruling?
The Supreme Court's decision to reject JSW Steel's resolution plan for Bhushan Power and Steel and direct its liquidation raises concerns for the company, the steel sector, as well as the insolvency resolution here in India. Well, let's break it down for you. The implications as well as the remaining uncertainties. Can JSW Steel appeal or seek some remedy? Well, Mr. H.P. Ranina says that JSW Steel can file a review petition in the Supreme Court and then work on a possible resolution. But why is Bhushan Power and Steel important to JSW Steel? Well, JSW Steel owns roughly around 83% stake all the way since October 2021. Bhushan Power and Steel accounts for around 10% of JSW Steel's consolidated EBITDA and nearly around 13% of its capacity. It also is strategically located in various parts of East India and helps plug some of the supply chain issues. Well, let's talk about some unanswered questions and also points to ponder. How much does JSW Steel could potentially look to recover? Well, they paid closer to 19,350 crores under the resolution plan. After that, they've incurred some additional capex over the last few years as well. The cash flows, though, from Bhushan Power and Steel would help them offset some part of this investment. But the recovery is unclear without official liquidation proceedings. Well, can JSW Steel operate the unit in the interim? A shutdown will cause 3 million ton drop in domestic steel supply. That's what will lead prices higher, especially amid the rising infrastructure as well as the construction demand. And does this set a negative precedent? Well, possibly yes. If a consummated resolution plan can be reversed many years later, it could deter future buyers. Well, it may also increase the legal challenges and lead to some kind of recovery. So let's see how this pans out. For the time being, it's a blow to JSW Steel.
Right, a blow to JSW Steel. Thank you, Nigel, for that. From steel to telecom, the government has clarified on converting spectrum dues of telecom companies to equity after Bharti Airtel sought similar treatment to Vodafone Idea. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that only spectrum dues acquired before 2021 can be considered for conversion to equity. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that dues for spectrum acquired in 2021 or after will not be considered. Sources also clarified that the conversion to equity is not automatic and will be subject to evaluation by the government. Right, the big international story we are tracking. China has said that it's evaluating the possibility of resuming trade negotiations with the United States. The country's Commerce Ministry has reiterated its request that the US remove all unilateral tariffs. The ministry added that failure to do so would indicate an outright lack of sincerity. Beijing indicated that senior US officials reached out for talks through relevant parties multiple times. Apple's second quarter earnings came in slightly above Wall Street's expectations. Revenue rose 5% year-on-year to 95.4 billion rupees, while profits stood at nearly $25 billion. However, Apple shares fell on Thursday after the company warned of a potential $900 million headwind in the June quarter due to Trump's war. Apple CEO Tim Cook said that majority of iPhones sold in the US will now originate from India and Vietnam. CNBC's Steve Kowak is here with more on the tech giant's quarterly results.
Company also giving its first comments on tariffs, saying it expects $900 million in costs in the June quarter because of it. We'll get to the tariffs, but first let's get to the specific results. Apple EPS was a beat at $1.65 compared to estimates of $1.63, and revenues also a beat, $95.36 billion compared to the $94.66 billion estimated. iPhone revenues were a beat as well, $46.84 billion compared to $45.84 billion expected. That's up about 2% year on year. Revenues, though, that was a slight miss and was a drag on the stock in after-hours trading. $26.65 billion. Street wanted to see $26.7 billion. But still, big-time growth here for the services business, up 12% year on year. And China revenues, those were down slightly, 2% year over year to $16 billion. As for tariffs, CEO Tim Cook said on the earnings call the company was able to manage its supply chain ahead of the tariffs going into effect in April. But he said Apple still expects that $900 million charge for the June quarter because of the tariffs. Even with the tariff uncertainty, Apple provided some broad guidance for the June quarter. Company now expects revenue to grow by low to mid-single-digit percentage points, and margins will still be strong, 45.5% to 46.5%, even with those tariff costs. Cook also said on the call Apple moved its supply chain around ahead of the tariffs in April to mitigate their effect in the June quarter, though the company can't predict the impact beyond that.
Amazon's first quarter earnings beat Wall Street expectations. The company reported a revenue of nearly $156 billion and an earnings per share of $1.6. However, revenue from Amazon Web Services grew at a slower pace than expected, missing estimates for the third straight time. Amazon gave a softer guidance for the second quarter. It highlighted that tariffs and trade policies and recessionary fears made its guidance subject to change. McDonald's posted its worst quarterly sales in the United States since the COVID pandemic as consumers pulled back on discretionary spending amid the uncertainty over tariffs. Its overall revenue of nearly $6 billion missed Wall Street expectations for the third time in 4 quarters. On McDonald's earnings call, the company officials flagged a notable uptick anti-American sentiment, particularly among consumers in Northern Europe and Canada. Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer BYD has posted its best month of sales yet for 2025. With this, BYD is on track to hit its full-year target of 5.5 million deliveries. New energy vehicle sales for the month was up more than 20% year-on-year. Furthermore, battery passenger EV sales topped its plug-in hybrid sales for the first time since 2024. Back home, Marico reported a mixed set of numbers in the fourth quarter. Its net profit and revenue beat street expectations. Profit rose by 8% on a yearly basis to 345 crore rupees, while revenue jumped by nearly 12% to 2,730 crore rupees. Margin for the quarter was lower than expected. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal held a meeting with the European Union Commissioner in Brussels about a trade agreement with the EU. The minister has said that both sides reaffirmed their commitment to concluding the long-awaited trade deal by the end of 2025. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the minister will revisit London to finalize issues in the trade deal with the UK. Abhimanyu Sharma is here with more. Abhimanyu.
It has been a week of intense and continuous discussions between India and the European Union as well as the United Kingdom for free trade agreements. The negotiations are already taking place between India and several trading blocs and several countries. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal had visited London, Oslo and Brussels. He had met a delegation from the European Union and both the sides had reaffirmed their commitment towards proceeding to ink an FTA within 2025 itself. While India also pointed out that not just tariff barriers but also non-tariff barriers need to be removed and any regulations which exist on both the sides should be equitable as far as application of such regulations is concerned. Earlier, Indian industry and also the Indian government has raised concerns over the proposed carbon tax and the EU deforestation regulation and the possibility of such regulations hurting the interests of Indian businesses. India has also earlier termed such regulations or proposed measures as lopsided. It's likely that India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal will go to London again to proceed with further discussions with the United Kingdom for an FTA. Now, a few final pending issues still remain with respect to signing of the FTA, which include issues like a bilateral investment treaty and financial services. It remains to be seen how early the discussions are going to conclude, as there are 3 pacts being negotiated. It's a free trade agreement, a bilateral investment treaty and a social security agreement or a convention agreement between both the sides.
Right, thank you, Abhimanyu, for that. India's manufacturing sector hit a 10-month high in April 2025 with the HSBC India Manufacturing PMI at 58.2. The seasonally adjusted index signaled the strongest improvement in the sector's health since June 2024. The improvement was driven by faster growth in employment and production. Remember, a figure above 50 indicates expansion, while one below 50 implies contraction of activity. Indian software firm Zoho has suspended its plan to build a $700 million semiconductor fabrication plant, citing technological uncertainties. In a social media post, the SaaS unicorn's founder Sridhar Vembu said, and I quote, "We wanted to be absolutely sure of the technology path before we take taxpayers' money." End quote. Zoho had applied for incentives under the India Semiconductor Mission in June 2023. The government is likely to roll out an electric truck scheme. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that 500 crore rupees have been allocated to incentivizing sale of electric trucks. The government has concluded inter-ministerial consultations and industry feedback has been taken into consideration. The Karnataka government has amended its motor vehicles tax policy. Under the revised policy, electric vehicles priced above 25 lakh rupees will now attract 10% tax. Meanwhile, vehicles costing below 10 lakh rupees will now have to pay one-time tax of 5% as against 1,800 rupees a year in the earlier regime. The highest tax will be imposed on vehicles costing above 15 lakh rupees, which will be at 15%. All right, on that note, it's time for a short break. Coming up next, actor Aamir Khan bats for a higher number of theatrical screens in India, underlines that even the biggest hits have a theatrical footfall, accounting for only 2% of the entire population. More on that when we return. Welcome back. 10 days since the Pahalgam terror attack that led to the death of 26 civilians, terrorists involved in the attack continue to remain at large. The Indian Army said that Pakistan Army violated ceasefire along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir last night for the 8th consecutive day. The Indian Army said it responded in a calibrated and proportionate manner. US Vice President J.D. Vance has said that he hopes India's response to Pakistan over the terror attack will be in a way in which it doesn't lead to a broader conflict. Vance also urged Pakistan to cooperate with India to find the terrorists involved in the attack. Remember, Vance was in India when the attack took place. AirIndia has said that it could incur an additional loss of $600 million if Pakistan's airspace remains closed for a full year. It has made a request to the government for a subsidy model for its international flights. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has commissioned India's first deep-sea transshipment port at Vizhinjam in Kerala. The project, which cost almost 9,000 crore rupees, was developed by the Adani Group. The event was attended by Kerala's Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan and Adani Group Chairman Gautam Adani. Thiruvananthapuram Congress MP Shashi Tharoor was also present. Ruh Afza maker Hamdard has informed the Delhi High Court that Ramdev has not pulled down the video that targets its product. Further added, those disparaging videos have only been made private and can be viewed by subscribers. This comes a day after Delhi High Court ordered Ramdev to remove the video within 24 hours. Meanwhile, the yoga guru maintained that he will take down the video within the time granted by the court. The counsel on behalf of Hamdard said that the video is also available on Astha channel. The court has listed the matter for 9th of May. All right, on to all the action from day 2 of the World Audiovisual Entertainment Summit. Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri called India the platform's largest market globally, adding that the appetite for reels in the country is insatiable. Meanwhile, YouTube CEO Neil Mohan said that 21,000 crore rupees have been paid to content creators so far. YouTube APAC head Gautam Anand also promised to invest 850 crore rupees in India's creator economy over the next 2 years.
India is headed towards becoming a global powerhouse, I think, for creativity. For us, it's the largest country in the world for Instagram at this point. But when I was working on the Facebook app, data here was expensive and networks here were slow. And that has changed dramatically over the last 5 or 7, maybe 8 years, both in terms of reliability, but most importantly in terms of cost. We've seen an immense amount of growth in how much time people spend online. But more than anything, we've seen growth specifically in video. For us, short-form video, for others, short-form and long-form video.
What is the big bet that you have on the Indian market when it comes to the creator economy? What's the kind of investment that we're talking?
We already see on YouTube over the last 12 months, over 100 million channels have uploaded a video. So we're on our way to that billion. We've also paid out over the last 3 years, 21,000 crores to our partners. We're still one of the few platforms that has our partnership program, which has been launched in India for several years now as well, and obviously has continued to scale. We're going to be investing 850 crores over the next 2 years to continue to foster and grow the creator ecosystem.
Can you talk to me a little bit about where this investment is going to go, how that's going to work? What exactly is YouTube's plan in India with this?
We have creator programs that we run all the time. We've also launched commerce and shopping here. We're trying to grow that part of our business. It's increasingly becoming an important part of how creators earn revenue. We understand brand deals are important, and so we're running programs on how to facilitate and grow that pie for our creators as well. So it's a combination of programs that we run, all to help not just new creators come onto the platform and thrive, but also our existing creators, how they can continue to grow their businesses.
Bharat is where it all began. India is the origin of Om, the sound of the birth of our universe, the birthplace of zero, Shunya, the beginning of the infinite, the home of Sanskrit that gave the world language.
Actor and producer Aamir Khan, who was also a part of a panel at the event, has argued for a higher number of movie screens in India. Khan underlined that even the biggest hits in India have a theatrical footfall, accounting for only 2% of the entire population. He also called the short time window between the theatrical and the OTT release of a movie a faulty business model.
Our biggest hits over the years, no matter which film it is, has had a theatrical footfall of 3 crore people or 3.5 crore people. Am I saying the right thing? That's what percentage of our population? 1, 2, 2%? So 2% of our population in a country which is recognized as a film-loving country, only 2% of the population watches our biggest hit in theaters. So where is the remaining 98% watching the film? So my belief has always been that we need to have a lot more theaters in India and theaters of different kinds. And there are so many districts, there are tracts of areas in India, vast areas, which don't have a single theater for people to watch films. If I have to be very honest to my audience when I'm marketing my film, I have to tell my audience that, guys, my film is releasing. But all those people who are on this particular subscription, on this particular OTT, they've already bought my film. They don't need to come to the theaters. The ones who are not in this OTT, please come and watch my film. This is my communication that I'll have to make in all honesty, which is a very awkward communication. So according to me, that window is too small. That between theatrical and OTT, you're killing your own business. If I tell you buy a Maruti car, and if you don't, I'll drop it at your house after 4 weeks. Why will you buy it? You will say, yes, drop it at my house after 8 weeks. I'll wait. And in a price-sensitive country like India, this matters a big deal. So I seriously feel that you have to, this is something that needs to be looked at, in my opinion.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. More news and updates continue right here on CNBC-TV18.